the most insane survival methods of ancient people. The reality of Stone Age. Winters 60,000 years ago, the world was dying. Glaciers were advancing. Temperatures were dropping below -40 degrees Celsius. And humans had to survive it without modern clothing, without heating systems, without any technology beyond stone and bone. The average human body loses all its warmth in ice water within 15 minutes. But ancient people survived entire winters in frozen environments. They did this through a combination of methods that should have been impossible. The first method was clothing, but not normal clothing. Archaeological evidence shows that ancient people were creating garments from animal hides using specialized stitching techniques. Bone needles, yes, actual needles, have been found in 40,000-year-old sites. These weren't just wrapping hides around their bodies. They were tailoring them, creating fitted jackets with insulation layers, making boots that sealed at the ankles. But clothing alone couldn't save them. They needed shelter. And what they built was far more sophisticated than anyone realized. The underground architects, digging survival. On the frozen plains of Eastern Europe and Siberia, where the ground was permafrost and trees were non-existent, ancient people did something radical. They dug down. Excavations in Russia have revealed something astonishing. Dwellings from 25,000 years ago had structural frameworks made from, get this, mammoth bones. Not wood, bones. Massive femurs and tusks were arranged in patterns, creating dome-like structures. Then they covered these frameworks with hides, anchored with stones. But the genius part wasn't the bones. It was what they did with the earth. These structures were built partially underground, with excavated floors that sat 50 to 100 centimeters below ground level. This simple act of digging created insulation. The earth around them acted as a thermal buffer. The deeper you go, the warmer it gets. Inside these dwellings, they built hearths, fire pits in the center. Bone analysis shows that these fires burned hot and constant. Charcoal deposits indicate that the fires were maintained day and night. The smoke would rise and escape through openings in the roof structure, while the heat remained trapped inside the circular dwelling. The floor space of these dwellings was roughly 20 to 30 square meters, small by modern standards. But for a group of 10 to 15 people huddled together during a winter that lasted 8 to 9 months, this space was survival. The cave engineers, living in stone. But not all ancient people lived on the open plains. Those who had access to caves faced a completely different survival problem. Moisture, darkness, and cold air that flowed from deep within the earth. Caves in France, Spain, and Central Europe show evidence of sophisticated occupation that dates back 35,000 years. And what's remarkable is that these weren't random settlements. They were organized, strategic. Archaeological analysis shows that ancient cave dwellers didn't use the deepest, darkest sections. Instead, they positioned themselves in what scientists call the twilight zone, areas that received some natural light from the entrance, but were protected from the cold air currents that swept in from outside. They created barriers. Bone fragments and stone arrangements suggest that they built windbreaks inside the caves, physical walls that redirected the cold air flows away from their living spaces. Some caves show evidence of wall paintings, but these weren't just art. The placement of pigment suggests that ancient people were testing where the smoke from their fires would travel, and they positioned their hand paintings in areas with good ventilation. The hearths in caves weren't centered like in open dwellings. They were pushed to the sides, positioned where the natural airflow would carry smoke away from the main living area. This wasn't luck. This was understanding aerodynamics. Thousands of years before the science existed, they were engineering ventilation systems. The tree dwellers, survival in the canopy. In warmer regions, parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, and Southern Europe, ancient people faced different challenges. Not cold, predators, dense jungle, disease. and they solved it by moving up. Archaeological evidence from 50,000 years ago shows construction methods that suggest tree dwellings. Post holes arranged in patterns that match the structure of large trees. Fragments of wooden beams that show sophisticated joints. Evidence that people were lashing and binding wood together with plant fibers. Living in trees made sense. Predators on the ground couldn't reach you. The canopy provided natural protection from heat. And in monsoon regions, elevated platforms meant survival during flooding. But building and maintaining a tree dwelling was insanely complex. They needed to create platforms that could hold 10 to 20 people. They needed to construct walls and roofs that could withstand wind and tropical downpours. They needed to ensure water drainage. And they needed to do all this while suspended dozens of meters above the ground. Archaeological sites in Indonesia and the Philippines show something even more advanced. Evidence of multiple connected dwellings, pathways between trees, suspension bridges made from vines. This wasn't just survival, this was engineering on a grand scale. The fire architects, controlling heat. Whether above ground, underground, in caves or in trees, every ancient settlement relied on fire. But not all fires were the same. The placement, the design, the type of fuel used, everything was calculated. Hearth analysis from dozens of archaeological sites reveals patterns. In tightly enclosed spaces, fires were built in specific locations to maximize heat distribution. Bone charcoal analysis shows that people were burning specific types of wood, hardwoods, that burned hotter and longer. They understood fuel efficiency. In Mammoth-Bone dwellings, the central hearth was circular and lined with stones. These stones didn't just contain the fire. They absorbed heat and released it slowly throughout the dwelling. Stone heat retention, thermal engineering. But the most remarkable discovery involves fire maintenance. Sites show evidence of designated ash pits, carefully dug areas where ash was collected and stored. Why would anyone collect and store ash? Because ash is lighter than water but retains heat. On bitterly cold nights, ancient people would have dumped heated ash into sleeping areas as a primitive heating method. Some findings suggest that ash was also mixed with fat to create a combustible paste that could be ignited for emergency heat. The hunters, the apex of survival, but no dwelling, no clothing, no fire, could matter if the group couldn't hunt. And ancient hunting wasn't random. It was science. Weapons evolved with obsessive precision. Spear points changed shape and size depending on what was being hunted. Harpoon heads designed for fish had curved barbs. Arrowheads for birds were lightweight and blunt. Points designed for large game were heavy, razor-sharp, and designed to penetrate thick hide and create massive bleeding wounds. Hunting large mammals like mammoths or aurochs required coordinated group effort. Archaeological evidence shows that hunts were often drive hunts. Groups would strategically position themselves, creating noise to drive prey toward natural traps. Cliff edges, deep ravines, narrow river passages. The prey would panic, bunch up, and become vulnerable. Once the prey was brought down, the processing was systematic and efficient. Bone analysis shows cut marks in precise patterns. They understood anatomy. They knew how to remove hides without damaging them. They knew how to extract marrow from bones, how to process organs, how to use every part of the animal. A single mammoth kill could provide meat for weeks, bones for construction, hides for clothing, and fat for fuel. This wasn't just food. This was survival infrastructure. The seasonal rhythm, living by the calendar. Ancient people weren't static. They moved with purpose. Seasonal migration patterns are evident in archaeological evidence. The same sites were reoccupied year after year, sometimes for thousands of years. In spring, groups moved to follow migrating reindeer herds. In summer, they positioned themselves near rivers to harvest fish runs. In autumn, they hunted and gathered plant materials for winter storage. In winter, they retreated to protected cave sites or built their most substantial dwellings. This mobility required organization. Goods had to be transported. Dwellings had to be temporary but effective. A knowledge of routes, water sources, and animal migration patterns had to be preserved and passed down across generations. Storage was critical. Evidence from archaeological sites shows that ancient people preserved meat, smoking it over fires, burying it in frozen ground, treating it with salt made from boiling seawater. They preserved plants, nuts, and seeds in specially constructed storage pits. Spoilage wasn't an option. A failed harvest or a missed hunt meant starvation. The infrastructure of survival. What's remarkable is that ancient settlements weren't just shelters. They were infrastructure hubs. Multiple hearths indicate specialized work areas. Bone tools found in certain zones suggest butchering stations. Pigment deposits suggest art or ritual spaces. Evidence from Russian sites shows that ancient people constructed stable refuse heaps, organized garbage disposal. They weren't just throwing bones and waste anywhere. They were maintaining sanitation, disease prevention through waste management. Some settlements show evidence of multiple occupational phases. A site would be used, then abandoned for seasons, or even years, then reoccupied, suggesting that roots and sites were remembered and transmitted through generations. The structure that held everything together. What all these survival methods reveal is that ancient people weren't just reacting to their environment, they were orchestrating it. The hunt wasn't spontaneous, it was coordinated. Scouts would locate prey, the group would plan the approach, hunters would position themselves. Timing had to be precise. A failed hunt wasted resources and time. A successful hunt fed everyone for weeks. They built sophisticated dwellings, but they never built cities. They engineered heating systems, but they never engineered power structures. They created tools, but they never created hierarchies that lasted beyond a single lifetime. Bone analysis from ancient sites shows minimal signs of violence. Somewhere around 12,000 years ago, in certain parts of the world, people stopped moving. They stopped following animals. They started planting seeds. And the moment they did that, the moment they created agriculture, everything changed. Suddenly, you could have surplus. Suddenly, you could have organized labor. Suddenly, you could have rulers. Suddenly, you could have organized warfare. But that's a story for another video. If you made it this far, you're truly incredible. Thank you. To help this community grow, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications because our next stories are going to be even deeper and more fascinating. Leave a like, share your feedback in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.